The small space station felt cold that morning. Doyen stood in the white hallway checking his uniform one last time. He was a soldier, but today he felt more like a hunter. His team was going after unknown creatures that had been found on a nearby asteroid. Nobody knew what these creatures were or where they came from. The mission was simple. Find them, catch them, bring them back to the science lab. That was what the orders said. Doyen had done many missions like this before. But something felt different today. He could not explain why. His team leader was Thex, a tall alien with hard shell-like skin and big eyes. Thex was from a race called the Vraxians. They were strong and followed rules perfectly. Thex never questioned orders. He just did what he was told. The ship landed on the asteroid with a soft bump. Doyen put on his helmet and checked his equipment. He had a stun gun, some rope, and his basic supplies. The other soldiers carried shock batons. These were long sticks that gave electric shocks. They were meant to stop the creatures without killing them. They walked through the rocky tunnels of the asteroid. The walls were gray and rough. Small lights on their suits showed the way. After 20 minutes of walking, they heard sounds. Soft sounds. Like small animals breathing hard, Thex raised his hand. Everyone stopped. He pointed forward. In the corner of a large cave, 3 small creatures pressed against the wall. They were about the size of dogs. They had scales like lizards, but faces that looked almost cat-like. Their eyes were big and golden. They were shaking. The creatures were clearly young. Babies or children. The biggest one stood in front of the other 2. It was trying to protect them. Doyen felt his heart beat faster. These were not dangerous monsters. These were scared children. Thex turned to his team. His voice came through the radio in their helmets. He said they would move in slowly and use the shock batons to stun the creatures. Then they would put them in cages and take them to the ship. His voice was calm and professional. This was just another job to him. The 6 Vraxian soldiers formed a circle around the creatures. They moved forward slowly. Their shock batons made buzzing sounds and glowed blue. The small creatures pressed harder against the wall. The smallest one started making a high crying sound. It was a sound of pure fear. Doyen looked at the scene. He saw soldiers with weapons surrounding small, helpless creatures. He thought about Earth. He thought about how humans had treated animals in the past, how they had hurt things that could not fight back. He thought about his grandmother's old dog, how it used to shake when it was scared during storms. Without planning it, without thinking about the consequences, Doyen stepped forward. He moved between the soldiers and the creatures. 6 shock batons turned toward him. 6 pairs of alien eyes stared at him in surprise. Thex's voice came loud through the radio. He said Doyen was breaking the rules. He said Doyen was stopping them from doing their job. He said Doyen needed to move right now. Doyen spoke quietly. He asked for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes before they used force. He said he wanted to try something different. Thex made a clicking sound with his mouth parts. He asked if Doyen was crazy. He asked if Doyen thought he could talk to animals. He asked if Doyen thought he could make friends with wild beasts. Doyen reached into his pack. He pulled out a brown bar. It was his food ration. Everyone called it bread, even though it did not taste like real bread. It was just compressed food that kept soldiers alive in space. But it was food. And food meant something important. Food meant survival. Food meant caring. He told Thex he wanted to try kindness instead of force. He said these creatures were young and scared. He said they deserved a chance. He promised that if it did not work in 5 minutes, he would step aside and let the soldiers do their job. There was a long silence. The only sounds were the soft crying of the smallest creature and the buzzing of the shock batons. Then Thex made another clicking sound. He told his soldiers to wait. He told them to lower their weapons but stay ready. He said Doyen had 5 minutes. Not 1 second more. Doyen turned to face the creatures. They were still pressed against the wall. Their golden eyes watched him carefully. The biggest one's muscles were tight, ready to fight even though it was so small. Ready to protect its family even though it had no chance. Doyen moved very slowly. He made sure his movements were smooth and calm. He had learned this on Earth when he worked with rescue animals before joining the space program. Animals could sense fear and aggression. They could tell if someone wanted to hurt them or help them. He unwrapped the food bar. The sound of the wrapper seemed loud in the quiet cave. He broke off a piece of the brown bar. Then he did something that made all the soldiers stare. He sat down on the ground, cross-legged. He made himself smaller, less threatening. Behind him, he heard the soldiers making confused sounds. They could not understand what he was doing. A soldier did not sit down during a mission. A soldier did not make himself vulnerable. A soldier did not show weakness. But Doyen was not trying to be a soldier right now. He was trying to be a friend. He held out his hand with the piece of bread on his palm. He spoke softly, even though he knew the creatures could not understand his words. He told them it was okay. He told them he would not hurt them. He told them he just wanted to help. The biggest creature tilted its head to one side. It was a curious gesture, like a dog trying to understand a new sound. Its nose moved as it sniffed the air. Doyen stayed very still. He barely breathed. He just waited. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. The soldiers grew restless. Thex was counting down the time. 3 minutes. 4 minutes. Still nothing happened. Then, with less than a minute left, the biggest creature took one small step forward. Just one step. Its golden eyes never left Doyen's face. It took another step, then another. Moving so slowly it almost seemed like it was not moving at all. Doyen's heart was beating so fast he thought everyone could hear it. But he did not move, did not speak, did not do anything that might scare the creature away. The creature came closer, close enough that Doyen could see the tiny scales on its face, close enough that he could feel its warm breath on his hand. It sniffed the bread carefully. Then very gently it took the food from his palm, but it did not run away. The creature sat down right there, an arm's length from Doyen. It started eating the bread slowly, its eyes still watching him. The other two creatures made soft sounds. They seemed to be asking if it was safe. The biggest creature made a gentle chirping sound back to them. Like it was saying yes, like it was saying this strange being was safe. The two smaller creatures crept forward. They moved faster than the first one, trusting their older siblings' judgment. Doyen broke off 2 more pieces of bread. He held them out. Within seconds, all 3 creatures sat around him in a small circle. They ate the bread he gave them. Sometimes they looked up at him with those incredible golden eyes. And in those eyes, Doyen saw something important. He saw intelligence. He saw trust. He saw choice. These creatures had chosen to trust him. They could have stayed against the wall. They could have tried to fight or run. But they chose peace. They chose to believe that this strange being with 2 legs and no scales meant them no harm. That was not the behavior of simple animals. That was the behavior of thinking, feeling beings. Behind him, Doyen heard Thex make a strange sound. It was not a click or a hiss. It was something like surprise, maybe even wonder. The commander spoke quietly through the radio. He said this was impossible. He said wild creatures did not do this. He said it should not be happening, but it was happening. Right in front of them all, 3 unknown alien creatures sitting peacefully with a human soldier, eating bread instead of fighting against shock batons, choosing trust over fear, and in that moment everything changed. Thex ordered his soldiers to lower their weapons completely. The shock baton stopped buzzing. The blue glow faded away. The cave became quiet except for the soft sounds of the creatures eating and the breathing of the soldiers. Doyen stayed very still. The 3 creatures had finished the bread. Now they were looking at him with curiosity instead of fear. The smallest one made a soft chirping sound. It reminded Doyen of baby birds back on Earth. The biggest creature moved closer. It stretched its neck forward and sniffed Doyen's hand. Its nose was wet and warm. Then it did something amazing. It gently touched Doyen's hand with its head. Like a cat asking to be petted. Like a dog showing affection, Doyen slowly moved his hand. He touched the creature's head very softly. The scales felt smooth and warm. The creature made a happy sound. It was a low rumbling noise that seemed to come from deep in its chest, the sound of contentment. The other 2 creatures saw this and came closer too. Soon all 3 were pressing against Doyen, making those happy rumbling sounds. They were not afraid anymore. They trusted him completely. Thex walked forward slowly. He stopped a few feet away and stared at the scene. His big compound eyes looked at Doyen and the creatures for a long time. Then he spoke through the radio. His voice sounded different, confused, maybe even a little bit respectful. He said this was not normal behavior for wild animals. He said his people had captured many different species over the years. None of them had ever become peaceful this quickly. Most fought until they were stunned. Some ran away. But none ever chose to trust their captors. Doyen looked up at the commander. He said maybe these creatures were not wild animals. Maybe they were something more. He said animals acted on instinct. These creatures made a choice. They chose to trust instead of fight. That was different. Another soldier spoke up. He said it was just food-seeking behavior. He said any hungry animal would come for food. It did not mean anything special. It did not prove intelligence, but Doyen disagreed. He pointed out that the creatures were not starving. They did not grab the food and run. They sat down and ate slowly. They stayed near him even after the food was gone. They chose his company. That was not simple hunger. That was social behavior. That was trust. The smallest creature climbed onto Doyen's lap. It curled up like a cat and closed its eyes. Within seconds, it was asleep. Its siblings pressed against Doyen's sides, also resting. They felt safe with him. Thex made clicking sounds with his mouth parts. He was thinking hard. Finally, he said they had to report this to headquarters. He said the standard protocol was to capture unknown creatures and take them to the research station. But this situation was unusual. He did not know what to do. Doyen spoke carefully. He said they should not take these creatures away by force. He said doing that would break the trust that had been built. He suggested they try a different approach. Let him stay here with the creatures. Let him observe them. Let him try to learn more about them. He said if these creatures really were intelligent beings, then taking them to a lab would be wrong. It would be like kidnapping. But if they were just animals, then a few more days of observation would not hurt anyone. Thex was quiet for a long time. The other soldiers waited for his decision. Some of them looked uncomfortable. They were used to following simple orders. This was complicated. This required judgment. Finally, Thex said he would call headquarters. He said he would explain the situation. He said they would wait for new orders. In the meantime, they would set up camp in the cave. They would watch and wait. The soldiers began unpacking their equipment. They set up lights and a small heater. The cave became warmer and brighter. The creatures slept through all of this activity. They trusted Doyen to keep them safe. After an hour, the smallest creature woke up. It yawned, showing small, sharp teeth. Then it looked around the cave with curiosity. It saw the soldiers moving around. It should have been scared. But it was not. It seemed to understand that if Doyen was calm, everything was okay. The creature climbed off Doyen's lap. It walked over to one of the Vraxian soldiers who was setting up a light. The soldier froze. He did not know what to do. The creature sniffed his leg. Then it made a happy chirping sound and walked back to Doyen. Thex watched this with great interest. He said the creature was not afraid of the other soldiers now. He said it seemed to understand that they were with Doyen. That meant they were safe too. He said this showed remarkable intelligence. Over the next few hours, Doyen observed the creatures carefully. He gave them water from his canteen. They drank it eagerly. He gave them more food. They ate it, but not desperately. They seemed to be eating because they enjoyed it, not because they were starving. The creatures played with each other. They chased each other around the cave. They made different sounds, happy chirps, curious trills, warning clicks. It was clearly a language of some kind. Simple, maybe, but definitely communication. The biggest creature found some rocks and started arranging them in patterns. It pushed them into lines and circles. Then it sat back and looked at its work. When Doyen came over to see, the creature made a proud chirping sound. It was showing off its creation. Doyen felt excitement growing in his chest. These were not simple animals. They created things. They played. They communicated. They made art. These were signs of intelligence. Real, undeniable intelligence. He called Thex over to see the rock patterns. The commander looked at them for a long time. He said his people had studied hundreds of species. They had rules about what counted as intelligent life. Creating patterns was one of the signs. So was tool use. So was complex communication. He said these creatures were showing all those signs. He said maybe Doyen was right. Maybe these were not animals to be captured. Maybe these were people. That word hung in the air, people. It changed everything. If these creatures were people, then the mission was wrong. If they were people, then approaching them with shock batons was an act of violence. If they were people, then they had rights. Thex received a message from headquarters. He listened through his radio. His face did not show emotion the way human faces did, but his body language changed. He became tense, worried. He told Doyen that headquarters wanted them to capture the creatures immediately. They said observation was taking too long. They said the creatures needed to be brought to the research station for proper testing. They said Doyen had one more day. Then they would send more soldiers with stronger weapons and orders to bring the creatures in no matter what. Doyen felt anger rising in his chest. He said one day was not enough. He said these creatures had shown clear signs of intelligence. He said taking them by force would be wrong. It would be kidnapping intelligent beings. Thex agreed but said he had to follow orders. Unless Doyen could prove beyond any doubt that these creatures were intelligent, headquarters would not change their minds. They needed solid evidence. They needed something that could not be argued against. Doyen looked at the three creatures. They were playing together, making happy sounds. They trusted him. They felt safe. How could he prove to cold bureaucrats light years away that these beings deserved freedom? How could he show them what he saw in those golden eyes? He had one day to prove that these creatures were people. One day to save them from a life in cages. He would not waste a single minute. He would find a way. He had to. Doyen spent the night thinking. He needed proof that these creatures were intelligent. But what kind of proof would convince the people at headquarters? They wanted science. They wanted data. They wanted something clear and simple. The creatures slept near him, curled up together in a pile. They looked so peaceful, so innocent. The biggest one had its tail wrapped around the two smaller ones, protecting them even in sleep. When morning came, Doyen had an idea. He would try to teach them something. If they could learn, that would prove intelligence. He pulled out his tablet computer. It had a simple drawing program on it. The creatures woke up slowly. They stretched and yawned. The smallest one came over to Doyen and made a questioning chirp. It wanted food. Doyen gave it some bread. Then he showed all three creatures the tablet. At first they were scared of the glowing screen. They backed away and made worried sounds. But Doyen was patient. He sat with the tablet and drew simple shapes, circles, squares, lines. The creatures watched from a safe distance. After a while, curiosity won over fear. The biggest creature crept closer. It looked at the screen with those golden eyes. Doyen drew more shapes. He made stars and triangles. The creature tilted its head from side to side, studying the images. Then Doyen did something risky. He held the tablet out to the creature. He showed it how to touch the screen to draw. The creature watched carefully. Then it reached out one clawed finger. It touched the screen. A line appeared on the screen. The creature jumped back in surprise. It made an excited chirping sound. The other two came running over. They all stared at the tablet. Then the biggest one touched the screen again. Another line appeared. For the next hour, Doyen watched as the creatures experimented with the tablet. They took turns drawing. They made lines and circles and strange squiggly shapes. They were not just randomly touching the screen. They were choosing where to put their marks. They were creating. Dex came over to watch. He said this was good evidence, but maybe not enough. Many animals could learn simple tasks. Monkeys on Earth could use tablets. That did not make them fully intelligent beings in the eyes of galactic law. Doyen felt frustrated. What more could he show? The creatures were clearly smart. They learned quickly. They communicated with each other. They created art. What else did headquarters need to see? Then something amazing happened. The biggest creature took the tablet from Doyen. It drew a circle on the screen. Then it looked at Doyen. It made a specific chirping sound. Then it pointed at the circle. Doyen did not understand at first. The creature repeated its actions. Circle, chirp, point. Then Doyen realized what was happening. The creature was trying to teach him. It was showing him that this chirp meant circle. It was trying to share its language. His hands shaking with excitement, Doyen drew another circle. He made the same chirping sound the creature had made. All three creatures became very excited. They bounced around making happy noises. Doyen had understood. He had learned a word in their language. Over the next few hours, the creatures taught Doyen more words. A triangle shape meant danger. A square meant safe. A wavy line meant water. They had symbols. They had language. They had culture. Doyen recorded everything on his camera. He made sure to get clear footage of the creatures teaching him. This was the proof he needed. Animals did not teach. They did not have symbolic language. Only intelligent beings did these things. But there was another problem. Where were the adult creatures? These were clearly children. Somewhere on this asteroid there must be parents, a family. maybe even a whole community. Doyen asked the creatures about this. He drew pictures of bigger versions of them. The creatures became quiet, sad. The smallest one made a low crying sound. The biggest one drew something on the tablet. It was a picture of large creatures lying down, not moving. Doyen felt his heart break. The parents were dead. These children were orphans. They were alone in the universe. That was why they had trusted him so quickly. They were desperate for someone to care for them, someone to protect them. He showed the pictures to Thex. The commander looked at them for a long time. He said this changed things. If the creatures were alone, then taking them might actually be helping them. They needed care. They needed protection. But Doyen disagreed strongly. He said there was a difference between helping and capturing. If they took these creatures to a research station, they would be locked in cages. They would be studied like objects. That was not help. That was imprisonment. He said if the creatures really were intelligent, they should have a choice. They should be asked what they wanted. Did they want to come with the soldiers? Did they want to stay here? Did they want to find others of their kind? Thex said that was impossible. How could they ask creatures that could not speak their language? How could they give complex choices to beings that might not understand? Doyen said they had already found a way to communicate. They had the tablet. They had the symbols the creatures had taught him. He could try to explain the situation using pictures and the simple language they shared. For the next 2 hours, Doyen worked with the creatures. He drew pictures on the tablet. He showed them a picture of the cave. He showed them a picture of a spaceship. He showed them a picture of other places they could go. The creatures watched carefully. They seemed to understand that Doyen was offering them something, a choice, a decision about their future. The biggest creature took the tablet. It drew a picture of itself and its siblings. Then it drew a picture of Doyen. Then it drew them all together on a spaceship. The message was clear. They wanted to go with Doyen. They wanted to leave this lonely asteroid. But they wanted to stay with him, not be put in cages. Doyen showed this to Thex. He said this proved everything. The creatures understood complex concepts. They understood choice. They understood future planning. They were making a decision about their own lives. This was intelligence. This was sentience. This could not be denied, Thex was convinced. He said he would send all the evidence to headquarters. He said he would argue that these creatures should be classified as intelligent life. He said he would request that they be treated as refugees, not specimens. But he warned Doyen that headquarters might not agree. The people there were far away. They had not seen what he had seen. They had not watched these creatures learn and teach and choose. They would only see data on a screen. Doyen knew Thex was right, but he also knew he could not give up. These creatures trusted him. They had chosen him as their protector. He would fight for them. He would make headquarters see what he saw. The message came back from headquarters faster than expected. It was not good news. They said the evidence was interesting but not conclusive. They said many species could learn simple symbol recognition. They said the creatures needed to be brought to the research station for proper testing. The order was final. More soldiers were being sent. They would arrive in 6 hours. They had orders to collect the creatures by any means necessary. If Doyen tried to stop them, he would be charged with disobeying orders. He could lose his rank. He could go to military prison. Thex delivered this news with sadness in his voice. He said he was sorry. He said he believed Doyen was right about the creatures, but he had to follow orders. They all did. Doyen looked at the 3 creatures. They were playing with the tablet, drawing pictures and making happy sounds. They had no idea that in 6 hours soldiers would come to take them away. They trusted him to keep them safe, and he was going to fail them unless he did something extreme, something that could ruin his career but might save their lives. He had an idea. It was risky. It might not work, but he had to try. Doyen made a decision that would change his life forever. He sent a message directly to the Galactic Council, not to headquarters, not to his commanding officers, straight to the top. To the people who made the laws that governed all intelligent species in the galaxy. In his message, he attached all his recordings. He included the video of the creatures learning to use the tablet. He included the footage of them teaching him their language symbols. He included everything that showed their intelligence. He wrote that he was requesting an emergency hearing. He wrote that a potentially intelligent species was about to be captured and imprisoned. He wrote that this was a violation of the Treaty of Sapient Dignity, the law that protected all thinking beings in the galaxy. He knew this was breaking every rule in the military handbook. Soldiers did not contact the council directly. They followed the chain of command. They did what they were told. But Doyen did not care about rules anymore. He cared about doing what was right. Thex found out what Doyen had done. He was angry at first. He said Doyen had destroyed his career. He said the military would court-martial him. He said Doyen was a fool, but then Thex became quiet. He looked at the three creatures who were sleeping peacefully near Doyen. He looked at the human soldier who had risked everything for beings he barely knew. And something changed in the Vraxian commander. He said he would add his own report to Doyen's message. He said he would testify that the creatures showed clear signs of intelligence. He said he would support Doyen's request for a hearing, even if it meant he would face punishment too. The other soldiers heard about what was happening. At first they were shocked. Then they started talking among themselves. One by one they came forward. They said they would also testify. They had all seen the creatures learn and communicate. They had all seen something special. 4 hours passed, then 5. The new soldiers with orders to capture the creatures would arrive soon. Still no response from the council. Maybe they had ignored Doyen's message. Maybe they thought he was just a crazy soldier who did not know what he was talking about. The creatures sensed the tension. They stayed close to Doyen. The biggest one kept looking at him with worried eyes. It seemed to know something bad was coming. Animals could sense danger. So could intelligent beings. Then, with only 30 minutes until the new soldiers arrived, Doyen's communicator beeped. It was a message from the Galactic Council. His hands shook as he opened it. The council had reviewed his evidence. They agreed that the situation was urgent. They were granting an emergency hearing. All military operations involving the creatures were suspended immediately. Doyen and the creatures were ordered to travel to the council station. The hearing would take place in 3 days. Doyen felt relief wash over him like a wave. They had a chance. A real chance to prove that these creatures deserved freedom. He showed the message to Thex. The commander made a clicking sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. He said Doyen was either the bravest human he had ever met or the most foolish. Maybe both. But he was glad they would have the chance to do this properly. The chance to let truth and evidence decide, not just military orders. The journey to the council station took 2 days. Doyen stayed with the creatures the whole time. They were scared at first when the spaceship took off. They had never been in space before. But Doyen held them close and spoke softly. They trusted him. They always trusted him. During the trip, Doyen continued teaching them and learning from them. He learned more of their language symbols. They learned some of his words. The biggest one started making sounds that were almost like human words. It was trying to speak his language. Doyen gave each creature a name, even though he knew they had their own names he could not pronounce. He called the biggest one Minho because it reminded him of his brave cousin back on Earth. The middle one he called G1 because it was curious about everything. The smallest one he called Hyejin because it was gentle and kind. The creatures seemed to understand these were special names. When Doyen said their names, they responded. They came when called. They looked up at him with those golden eyes. Names were important. Names meant you were someone. Not something. Someone. The council station was huge. It floated in space like a small moon. Thousands of beings from hundreds of different species lived there. It was the center of galactic government, the place where important decisions were made. Doyen and the creatures were taken to a special chamber. It was not a cage, which Doyen was grateful for. It was more like a large room with comfortable places to rest. The creatures explored it cautiously while Doyen prepared for the hearing. On the day of the hearing, Doyen put on his best uniform. He wanted to look professional. He wanted the council to take him seriously. But he was terrified. What if they did not believe him? What if they looked at his evidence and said it was not enough? What would happen to Minho, Jiwan, and Hyejin? The hearing chamber was enormous. It was shaped like a sphere, and the walls were made of some transparent material that made it feel like they were floating in space. Seats rose in tiers all around, filled with council members from dozens of different species. Doyen stood in the center with the 3 creatures beside him. They were in a special enclosure that had clear walls so everyone could see them. Minho stood in front of his siblings protectively. He sensed this was important. The High Arbiter spoke. She was a being made of what looked like living crystal. Her voice came through translators, filling the chamber. She asked Doyen to present his evidence. Doyen took a deep breath. He told the story of how he met the creatures, how they were surrounded by soldiers with shock batons, how he chose to offer them bread instead of violence, how they chose trust over fear. He showed the videos. The council members watched in silence as the creatures learned to use the tablet, as they taught Doyen their symbol language, as they drew pictures and made choices about their future. Some council members seemed impressed. Others looked skeptical. One of them, a being with blue-scaled skin, spoke up. He said many species could learn simple tasks. He said this did not prove full sentience. He said the creatures might just be clever animals. Doyen felt anger rising but kept his voice calm. He said there was a difference between training and teaching. He said the creatures had not just learned. They had taught him. They had created a shared language. Only intelligent beings did that. Another council member asked a question that made Doyen's heart sink. She asked why. If the creatures were so intelligent they had not built cities or technology, why were they living in caves on an asteroid? Why were they so primitive? Doyen explained that these were children, orphaned children whose parents had died. He said judging their intelligence by their technology was wrong. Human children could not build cities either, but that did not make them less human. The High Arbiter raised her hand. The chamber became silent. She said the council would now observe the creatures directly. She said she wanted to see them interact with Doyen. She wanted to see this communication he had described. Doyen was brought into the enclosure with the creatures. He sat down on the floor. The creatures immediately came to him. Minyo climbed into his lap. Jiwon and Heejin pressed against his sides. Doyen pulled out the tablet. He drew a circle and made the chirping sound that meant circle. All three creatures responded with the same chirp. Then Minho took the tablet. He drew something new. It was a picture of the council chamber they were in. He pointed at it, then pointed at the real chamber around them. The council members leaned forward. Minyo continued. He drew pictures of Doyen, then pictures of the council members. Then he drew all of them together with symbols that meant safe and peaceful. He was telling a story. He was saying that Doyen had brought them here, that they were safe, that the council would help them. The chamber erupted in sound as council members talked among themselves in dozens of different languages. The High Arbiter watched Minho carefully. Her crystalline face seemed to glow brighter. Finally, she spoke. She said what they had just witnessed was remarkable. She said the creature had shown abstract thinking, symbolic representation, narrative construction. These were all markers of sentient intelligence. She said the council needed to deliberate, but she was impressed by what she had seen. The hearing was adjourned. Doyen was told the council would make their decision within a day. He took the creatures back to their chamber. His whole body shook with tension and hope. They had done well. Minyo had been brilliant. But would it be enough? Doyen could not sleep that night. He lay awake thinking about everything that could go wrong. The creatures slept peacefully nearby, trusting that everything would be okay. He wished he could be as calm as they were. Morning came slowly. A message arrived saying the council had reached a decision. Doyen was to bring the creatures to the hearing chamber immediately. His heart pounded as he got ready. This was it. This moment would decide everything. The hearing chamber was even more crowded than before. News of the case had spread. Beings from all over the station had come to watch. Everyone wanted to see what the council would decide about these small creatures and the human who had fought for them. The High Arbiter called for silence. The chamber became quiet. She spoke in a voice that was both powerful and gentle. She said the council had spent many hours reviewing all the evidence. They had watched the videos many times. They had debated and discussed. She said this was not a simple decision. The creatures were young. They did not have the technology or cities that most intelligent species had, but they had shown something more important. They had shown the ability to think, to learn, to teach, and to choose. The High Arbiter's crystalline form glowed brightly as she announced the decision. By a vote of 41-6, the council had decided to classify these creatures as sentient beings. They would be called the Kivathi, a name from their own language that meant children of the stars. Doyen felt tears running down his face. He did not try to hide them. The creatures sensed his emotion. They pressed against him, making soft, comforting sounds. They knew something good had happened, but the High Arbiter was not finished. She said the Council had learned something important from this case. She said their existing rules for first contact with new species were not good enough. Too often they approached unknown beings with force instead of friendship. She said Lieutenant Doyen had shown them a better way. When he found the Kivathi cubs surrounded by soldiers with shock batons, he could have followed orders. He could have captured them by force. Instead, he offered them bread. He offered them kindness. And that simple act of compassion had changed everything. The Council was creating a new rule for first contact. Before any force was used, before any creatures were captured, there must be an attempt at peaceful contact. Soldiers would offer food and friendship before weapons and fear. This would be called the Doyen Protocol. The chamber erupted in sounds of approval. Beings from dozens of species made their own versions of applause. Doyen stood there, overwhelmed. He had just wanted to save 3 small creatures. He never imagined he would change how the entire galaxy approached new life. After the hearing, many council members came to meet Doyen and the Kivathi. They wanted to see the creatures up close. They wanted to understand this species that had touched so many hearts. Minho was not afraid. He greeted each new being with curiosity. He showed them his drawings on the tablet. He taught them Kivathi symbols. Jiwan and Hijin were shyer but gradually came forward too. They were becoming confident. They were learning that not all strangers were dangerous. The Council made arrangements for the Kivathi. Scientists would search the asteroid where they were found. They would look for other Kivathi survivors. They would try to find the home planet where their species came from. In the meantime, Doyen was given permission to continue caring for them. He was assigned as their official guardian. They would live with him on a research station where xenobiologists would study their language and culture. But they would not be locked up. They would not be treated as specimens. They would be treated as people. Thex came to visit before Doyen left the council station. The Vraxian commander looked different somehow, softer. He said this whole experience had changed him. He said he had spent his life following orders without questioning them. He had thought that was what good soldiers did, but Doyen had shown him that sometimes good soldiers had to do more. They had to think. They had to question. They had to choose what was right even when it was hard, even when it went against orders. Thex said he was requesting a transfer. He wanted to work with the new first contact teams that would use the Doyen Protocol. He wanted to teach other soldiers how to approach unknown species with kindness instead of weapons. Doyen shook Thex's hand. Well, his claw. It was an awkward gesture between their 2 very different species. But it meant something. It meant respect. It meant friendship. 3 months later, Doyen stood at a window looking out at space. The research station orbited a beautiful green and blue planet. Scientists had found it, the Kivathi homeworld, and they had found more Kivathi. Thousands of them. A whole civilization that had been thought lost. The adult Kivathi had been devastated by a plague that killed many of them. The survivors were slowly rebuilding. They had been so focused on survival that they had not known some of their children were lost on an asteroid. When they learned about Minho, Jiwan, and Hijin, they sent representatives to meet them. The reunion was emotional. The cubs were reunited with an aunt who had survived the plague. She was overjoyed to find them alive. She thanked Doyen over and over in broken galactic common that she was learning. But the cubs did not forget Doyen. They visited him often. Minho especially liked to show him new things he had learned. The young Kivathi was becoming a bridge between his people and the wider galaxy. He had a gift for languages and technology. The Kivathi joined the galactic community as equal members. They shared their unique perspective and culture. They became known as passionate advocates for protecting young beings of all species. Their motto was simple but powerful. Offer bread before batons. The Doyen Protocol was used 17 times in the first year after it was created. Each time it led to peaceful first contact with new species. Not one shot was fired. Not one being was hurt. 17 new civilizations joined the galactic community through kindness instead of force. Doyen received many medals and honors. He was promoted and given important positions. But he always said the real heroes were 3 small cubs who were brave enough to trust a stranger, who offered them bread. Sometimes late at night, Doyen thought about that moment in the cave. The moment he chose to step between the soldiers and the creatures. the moment he chose compassion over orders. That single choice had changed so much. It proved something humans had always believed but the galaxy had forgotten, that the measure of any civilization was not in its weapons or technology. It was in how it treated those who were different, those who were weak, those who could not fight back. On Earth, in a small museum, they kept one of Doyen's old ration bars, the bread that had started everything. Children came to see it on school trips. They learned about the importance of kindness. They learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is offer food instead of fighting. The galaxy was a big place. There were still many unknown species out there, many first contacts yet to happen. But now, whenever soldiers approached something unknown, they carried bread in their packs. They remembered Lieutenant Doyen and the Kivathi cubs. They remembered that peace was always worth trying first. Years passed. Minho grew up to become a diplomat. He traveled the galaxy helping to establish peaceful relations between different species. He always carried a ration bar with him. When people asked why, he told them the story of how a human soldier had given him bread when everyone else had offered him fear. He told them how that simple act of kindness had saved his life and changed the galaxy. He told them that we all have a choice in how we meet the unknown. We can approach with weapons or with welcome, with shock batons or with bread. Doyen grew old but never retired. He continued working with first contact teams. He trained new soldiers in the protocol that bore his name. He taught them that strength was not just about how hard you could fight. It was about knowing when not to fight at all. On his last day, when he was very old, Minho came to visit him. The Kivathi was now a respected leader among his people, but he sat with Doyen like they used to sit in that cave so many years ago. Minho took out a piece of bread, real bread this time, not a ration bar. He broke it in half and offered a piece to Doyen. It was a gesture that meant everything, a gesture that said friendship transcends species, that kindness creates bonds stronger than any weapon. They ate together in comfortable silence. Two friends from different worlds. Two beings who had shown the galaxy what was possible when you chose compassion over cruelty, when you chose to see others as people, not as threats. The story of the soldier who gave bread to the cubs lived on. It was told on thousands of worlds in hundreds of languages. It became more than just history. It became a reminder, a promise, a hope that in a vast and sometimes scary universe, kindness matters, that reaching out in friendship is always better than striking out in fear, that the simple act of sharing food can change everything, and somewhere in the galaxy soldiers still carry bread in their packs, ready to offer it to any stranger they meet, ready to build bridges instead of walls, ready to prove that the greatest strength of any species is not their ability to fight, but their willingness to feed.